Again, the title of our webinar today is How Philanthropists Are Making Transformational Gifts. As you can see from this title page, we're looking at transformation, starting from a cocoon, going to a full-blown butterfly. And as we look at transformational giving, next slide. As we look at transformational giving, all of us have seen the headlines of what we really would consider mega gifts made to institutions across the country. These are just a few of the headlines of some of the gifts made in 2016. These gifts didn't happen by accident. There was a match made where the institutions and donors came together to make a meaningful difference. Today's objectives, Karen and I will be looking at the giving landscape, what is a transformational gift, looking at some trends, as well as transformational donor profiles. How do you best position your organization to receive transformational gifts? We also want to talk a little bit about the sweet spot, look at how do we engage, and lastly, what are the things that we need to keep top of mind as we look to growing our capacity as a nonprofit sector to engage with these philanthropists. Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you to let's walk through the giving landscape.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Well, I would assume that many people on the phone are familiar with Giving USA. It's the longest running annual report about U.S. charitable giving, and it includes estimates for the sources of giving and the amounts received by type of organization, published by the Giving USA Foundation. It was started in 1956 by the American Association of Fundraising Council, which is now the Giving Institute, and it's made possible, this research is made possible by contributions from the Giving Institute member firms, including the Alfred Group. We use this information a lot to refer to, and what I'm going to do today is share 3 of these key slides with you because they really set the stage for where we focus our fundraising toward transformational gifts. So if we look at this first slide here, the best part of this is that it was $373 billion that was given in charitable donations in 2015. That is the largest number that it has ever been. It's really exciting. And what I love about this slide is that it shows you where that money came from. And if you look at the biggest piece of the pie, $264 billion, or 71% in outright charitable gifts from individuals, and then you add 9% or $31.76 billion that was received in charitable bequests, and the portion of foundation income, that's 16% or $58 billion, about half of that came from families and individuals. You add those together and you have an estimate of about 87% of all charitable giving comes from individuals. And the reason we use this slide whenever we're doing training with boards or whenever we're talking with people about building their major gift capacity, it's because it is all around people and how we can increase individual giving. This next slide is a wonderful snapshot of the recipients of these contributions. The great news here as well is that every sector grew over the past 2 years, with religion still receiving the largest percentage of the pie. And those of us who've been looking at this information for many years know that religion used to be 50% of the pie. It's not that the dollars have gone down, it's that there are so many other sectors that have emerged that weren't even being tracked when this research first began. So 32% of all charitable giving is going to religious causes, followed next by education at 15%, human services 12%, and gifts to foundations at 11%. This next slide really is the final slide I'll share from the Giving USA statistics, and it really again, it has so much meaning where you're looking at charitable gifts just in outright cash gifts from people since 1975, a steady incline. Of course, we all experienced the recession of 2009 and 10, but what's great about looking at this chart is that the dip in charitable giving did not nearly reflect the dip in the economy. It did go down, but not nearly to the extent that that we felt that in the economic downturn. The line that is in gold represents inflation-adjusted dollars. If we were to compare apples to apples, in 1975, 103 billion would be the inflation-adjusted amount to 23 billion that was cash in 1975, which is a better way to really track where we are. So it's just, again, this helps us focus on why we spend so much of our time as consultants to nonprofits helping organizations build capacity through individual gifts. Some of the trends that have impacted individuals and have impacted giving, of course, over the last few years, after we came out of the recession, but just over the last year, personal and household income has grown by 4.4%. Consumption expenditures are up. The stock market is performing very well. Home equity it really influences giving. When the real estate equity grows, charitable giving grows. And we also really want to look at generational giving patterns, how people are passing philanthropy down through the families, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go into the presentation. So really, if as a takeaway in terms of these statistics, stay close to your individual donors and keep the stewardship activities, keep bringing them in to your organization in all different ways. One of the things that we really want to see change is that the AFP Fundraising Effectiveness Survey report reported that the average donor retention rate is only 46%. I would really like to see that donor retention rate go up. And so it's something for everyone to really think about. As we talk about transformational gifts, we really want to zero in on who is making some of those gifts. And so we look at high net worth households and some of the giving trends in 2013, which came from the U.S. Trust study on high net worth philanthropy. It comes out every 2 years. So this was the 2014 study, and the 2016 study has not yet come out. But what's notable about this is that 98% of high net worth households gave to charity in 2013. And what that means is that high net worth households were most likely to give to education. Education received 85% of that charitable gift, of that charitable contribution. And the more specifically, actually, 73% went to higher education and almost 60% to K through 12 education. Giving to basic needs represented about a little close to 81%, and then the arts followed at about 70%. So total giving for most high net worth households were less than $100,000, and 62% of their largest gifts were less than $10,000. So these were not mega gifts, but these were high net worth households. If we look at ultra high net worth, how do we define that? Well, this information comes from the Forbes 400 Chronicle of Philanthropy's top 50 list, and some of the information from the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy Research. The estimated combined net worth of 400 of the wealthiest Americans grew to $2.34 trillion in 2015. What's interesting about that is that the list includes people with net worth of at least $1.7 billion. And just to be on that list of the top 400 wealthiest, you had to have made an additional 150 million over 2014 to stay on that top 400. 17 billionaires are under the age of 40. We're going to talk about generational giving in a little bit. 50 of the largest gifts in the U.S. were from living individuals, totaling $7 billion. Colleges and foundations received the lion's share at nearly 65% of the total, and the majority of the million or higher gifts come from donors in the same geographic region as the recipient, which is interesting to remember. 60% of the gifts that were million-dollar gifts came from donors in your geographic regions. So Brenda, I'm going to turn it back over to you to help us understand what is a transformational gift.
Well, we receive this question all the time when we talk about transformational gifts and transformational giving. For some organizations, a transformational gift could be $10,000, $100,000, $1 million. For others, it could be $100 million. Whatever the amount, these gifts have a major and lasting impact on an organization to achieve its mission. As you look at these three bullets, it really depends on the size and culture of the organization, and many organizations have to grow. Small organizations certainly look at a $10,000 gift if they're a startup as being truly transformational because it will enable them to achieve the next leg on their journey. More than gifts, these investments, and again, we're calling them investments, these are investments in the future of an organization and in the community, and they significantly impact the organization's constituents, its work, and the outcomes. As we look at, so what's the difference between a transactional gift and a transformational gift? So we created this slide just to give you a sense as you're thinking about, how should my organization look at gifts that are coming into our organization? So you can take a look at it in terms of transactional gifts. We tend to call it financial transactions. Those are basically checks. You receive a check, and that check is based on the fact that your organization has needs. The donor typically doesn't have a deep attachment, but they have connection. They don't really serve a strategic purpose. So it's giving your organization the $25. Sometimes it can even be a $10,000 gift depending on the donor. For that donor, that could be a transactional gift. The gift for a transactional gift, the gift is complete when the receipt is sent or the check clears. The driver for the donor is the cause. And there's typically not, deep, impactful conversations with the donor. Now, on the other side of the coin, if we're looking at, so what makes a gift transformational? And we want to say it's a complete relationship. So the donor is leading with their head, heart, and hand is coming attached to the investment. Now, sometimes it could be a check, but oftentimes it's in the form of assets of some kind. The donor is looking to determine how does your organization meet needs, which is different from having needs, but what's the impact of your organization? The donor desires to have a material impact and enact long-term change. These gifts typically have a unique capacity to alter the programs or future of the organization. The gift is complete when the donor sees that what their gift has done. The driver now is based on issues. What are the issues that your mission and organization are impacting? And the gift typically results from a deep dialogue around the donor's passion, personal needs, and philanthropic goals. So here you see the driver is very much of a donor-centric approach to investing in your institution. We took a look at, Karen was talking about high net worth individuals and the ultra mega rich. Well, let's take a look at the number of $1 million gifts or more by year. We went back to 2006 just to see, well, what's been happening with donors making these large, $1 million plus gifts, since 2006. So you can see in 2006, there were $696 million plus gifts, and you can kind of see where what happened, we had it was an increase in 2007. Just did not feel wealthy. Now, if you for us to think, you're $150 million down, I think no matter how much money you have, you still feel a pinch. And certainly we saw in 2009 and 2010, these donors were feeling that pinch. But then you see where it started rebounding in 2011, started growing 12, 13, it jumped from 2012 to 2013. You see where it went from $699 million plus gifts to 886. We had a little bit of a downturn in 2014. It perked back up in 2015. Already in 2016, since September 1, we've identified $568 million plus gifts. And that's as of the beginning of September. And we're projecting that we will probably surpass the number of $1 million gifts made in 2015. On the next slide, you will see of the 568 million plus gifts given so far this year, 65% of those dollars went to colleges and universities, followed by the arts and then by health. It's kind of interesting when you kind of look at, the sectors that these gifts go to. Colleges and universities have been pretty stable in terms of the number and size of attracting $1 million plus gifts. The arts, they tend to go down and down economic years, and we're happy to see a rebound, because typically where you see the two strongest drivers for $1 million gifts would be in education and health. So it's kind of interesting to see in 2016 where arts and culture is outpacing health at this point. So who are these donors? This is a word cloud made up of the top 50 most generous American donors in 2014. And I know we recognize many of the names on this list. These top 50 most generous contributors gave away $9.8 billion in 2014. And this was up nearly 28% from the year before. So obviously, these folks are doing well. When we think about the profile of donors making transformational gifts, there are a couple of key constituency groups that when we went back to conduct our research, that when we looked at, so what are the categories? And here are some of the categories that is kind of interesting to pull out. We went back to certainly the top 50. We also took a look at the Indiana school. They conducted a research project a couple years ago, the $1 million plus list. And what we found is that really was kind of grouped in three large buckets. Entrepreneurs were high on the list in terms of making these transformational gifts. And we saw a growing trend for women. And then, of course, we saw baby boomers, and especially more gifts coming from second generation philanthropists who benefited from the intergenerational transfer. We know that all donors are different. So a study done in women's philanthropy at the University of California, and it was kind of interesting that it found that women tend to get involved first, then make a financial commitment. Our traditional male donors would instead make a gift first, especially when they were asked by a peer. And if so inclined, they would then get involved. So it's really interesting as you think about your strategy and creating solicitation teams or engagement teams and ways to engage your volunteers. And lastly, when you think about the new philanthropists or entrepreneurs, they want to get involved with both the definition of the gift and the institution that it will transform. these entrepreneurs also want to lead and want to bring their business expertise. We also found that that even though there are different categories of donors, there are some principal characteristics that tend to emerge when talking about transformational donors. And again, this is something that I think we all know, but to just hear it again, transformational donors invest in results. Again, it goes back to impact. What are you delivering? They seek values-driven organizations. They're often willing to make longer-term commitments because these folks aren't in it for the short haul. They're in for the long term because these are organizations that they care about and they've had some long-term connection to in many cases. Oftentimes, these philanthropists are impatient for results, and sometimes they ask. I mean, certainly I've been involved in situations where sometimes organizations dance around the question. Put it out there when you feel that the prospect is ready, because they want to get on with it, especially entrepreneurs. They want to know, what are you going to do and how can I best be a part of this? What do you need from me? And what is the difference it's going to make? These donors also want organizations to accept their opinions and thoughts, not just their money. They often want to have input. They want to transform organizations and society. Oftentimes we find that it's about legacy. For many of these donors, what is the legacy that they're leaving behind? What is the difference? And I think that another really, two other things that I think Karen alluded to earlier was a high percentage of these donors are giving local. Many times I work with clients and, we certainly want to be able to have a case that will appeal to a broader audience where we can say, well, let's go nationally to see how many national donors. And I can just tell you this from experience from working on national campaigns. Donors provide sustainability. Your national philanthropist, they may provide, a transformational gift, but it's really hinged on the fact that you can sustain the program and that this isn't going to be, a one-time opportunity and your organization is going to shut its door. The last thing that's interesting about these transformational donors, they're willing to invest in stability and internal systems to support continued fulfillment of mission. So these donors understand overhead. They understand the fact that you have to have a strong infrastructure in order to create strong results. So as you're thinking about your strategy, don't be afraid and think you always have to have a programmatic ask. Many of them are investing in the infrastructure of the organization that they're supporting, as well as programmatic. When we take a look at what are some of the motivations for these high net worth households and these transformational donors, almost 74% of them believe that their gift can make a difference. And they're giving for personal satisfaction, and they say that their charitable activity brings personal fulfillment. So there's a joy in giving, and so don't discount that joy that a donor receives out of making a difference. One of the things that we talk about here at the Alpha Group when we talk with our clients about, so, we know who most of these individuals are in our community. We know what's driving their motivation. They want to make a difference. They want to see impact. They want to see results. We talk about something called the 4 rules of persuasion. So how are you approaching the conversation? What do you think these donors are looking for, and what are they responding to? And there are 4 rules of persuasion that I want to quickly touch on to kind of give you a framework to think about how you position your organization in the minds of these donors. So the first is reciprocity. This is in the case where the donor tries to repay in kind what another person has provided to them. So again, you might think about it from the standpoint of education. When you look at the headlines, many of those gifts were scholarship gifts. and it's a pay it forward. So those gifts were made to support scholarships, and this was really out of a donor's gratitude that someone made a way or provided scholarships for them to be able to achieve their college education. So they're paying it forward, and typically they're crediting that university or institution for their success. So they want to give back. So when you think about your case for support, what is the give back? And I know many times I was with the American Red Cross, and many of our clients certainly, many of our donors certainly never experienced a fire or losing all of their possessions, but they certainly identify with what it would be like to either come home or be at your home and lose everything in the fire and have to build your life all over again. So when we worked on key messaging to donors, we really wanted them to have an emotional connection to what was going on with the population that we were serving in our community. The next area is scarcity. Scarcity revolves around opportunities seem more valuable when they are less available. Here, the donors responding to a unique opportunity or program that is transforming or not yet discovered or tested. And so this is where you're really looking for what is that unique opportunity that a donor could provide. These donors, many of them, they like to know that they were the first. They're a part of helping create groundbreaking research. They're making something happen that wouldn't otherwise happen. You know, one example from our top 50 list, Larry Ellison, who's the founder of Oracle, he gave a $100 million gift to eradicate polio. And again, it's a scarcity. It was uncommon. It wasn't something where not everyone was giving to it, but again, it's something that he can put a stake in the ground and have and be recognized for really making a difference in that particular unique opportunity to solve a problem. Authority. The driver becomes giving to an organization that is widely recognized as a leader or authority on a particular issue. I was once interviewing a philanthropist on behalf of a client, and he had indicated he had just made a $50 million gift to a health institution here in Chicago. And I asked, you know, what the driver was. He said, I like giving to a winner. And they're a winner not because they say so, but because the world says so. So he explained that when he looks at how he gives, he wants to make sure he always has, and he approaches it almost like a portfolio kind of mentality, where he has some winning stocks in terms of winning organizations that has high visibility and that he knows can speak from a place of authority relative to the impact that they're making in the world. Consistency. Here, a donor is looking for your track record of success. And I think a good example of this might be when we look at the success that Harvard has had. I saw an interview not too long ago in terms of why you keep giving to Harvard. You know, they have a lot of money already. Well, the response was, it's safe. Their peers are giving to an organization that is doing great work, and consistently they deliver high quality, well-educated students. So that consistency in the work that they do became a very keen driver for many of the donors. As you think about your case, what is your message around consistency? What do you do extremely well that no one else is doing? What is unique about the work that you are doing? What are you the authority in? So think about those 4 persuaders as you think about framing out key messaging that you're communicating to this donor group. When we look at how are transformational gifts being made, certainly it's no secret that many of these gifts, when you look at the headline, they're coming from family foundations. They're also operating through donor advised funds, through community foundations, as well as commercial organizations like Fidelity, venture philanthropy, social impact. We know all about social impact bond, which is growing in its usage, transfer of assets from sale of businesses, plan gifts, charitable lead annuity trust. The C-CLAT is something that is becoming more and more popular. This is an opportunity where donors today are balancing their giving to children into charity, where the donor is able to pre-fund charitable donations. And we're also seeing these hybrid structures, limited liability corporations, like the one that I'm going to talk about in a second with Mark Zuckerberg and his wife. The other point I want to make about how these transformational gifts are being made is just to share something that came out of the Bank of America study. When they asked the question to these high net worth individuals, where are you seeking information on how to make gifts or who to make gifts to? One of the things that was a highlight and a key finding, that in addition to having relationships and connections to long-time organizations, they found that many philanthropists are seeking out advice from professional advisors, asking them who are some organizations doing cutting-edge work that I might want to put on my list for consideration. So the takeaway here is, if you really want to be on the list of these individuals, a part of your game plan and strategy should be, are you interacting with professional advisors so they are aware of your organization and the work that you're doing? I was doing a focus group with professional advisors not too long ago, and I asked them about, so how do you provide, advice to your clients? And the answer was, well, sometimes, because we don't have any information, if I'm involved in an organization or if I know someone who's involved, that's the name that I give, because I just don't know who else to recommend. And so obviously there's a huge opportunity for nonprofits to make their presence known among professional advisors. When we look at the gift that Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan made, they pledged $45 billion to improve the world for the next generation. And they used a vehicle where they created a LLC rather than a charity or a foundation. And this hybrid structure makes impact investments as well as grants. So it's kind of walking both sides of the road in terms of how it's operating as a quasi giving entity. I just wanted to make a note that just yesterday it was announced that this couple has committed $3 billion to cure all diseases. So again, the money keeps flowing for good causes.
Well, Brenda, it's very timely when we think about transformational gifts and transformational donors. And, as Brenda said, these high net worth households, they have a strategy. It's not an accident. And most of these donors who are making these kinds of gifts have a plan. The wonderful example just from yesterday, it was very timely when we saw the news this morning about the Zuckerbergs and Chan initiative to take part of that money that they had committed and commit it specifically to cure all disease. I mean, that is a big goal, and it's fantastic. Their mission is to advance human potential and promote equality. So I think what's really important to take away here is that the high net worth households, they do have a strategy. And in fact, 72.5% of wealthy households stated they had a giving strategy. A slightly lower number, approximately 62%, said they have a budget for their charitable donations. And slightly over half of the high net worth households monitor or evaluate their impact of their gift, which is important in terms of how are we reporting back to the donors the impact that this gift has had. And they're tracking that. It's part of their strategy. Almost all high net worth households reported that their giving is focused. And something around 47% said they actually will focus their gifts in certain strategic areas. And the other half said it's highly focused, that their strategic areas are highly focused and very planned. Brenda, you mentioned to me the other day what you had seen, these Northern Trust workshops for philanthropy to bring their kids into this. I wonder if you could share that for a moment.
Yeah, I think we're seeing more and more banks and organizations who work with high net worth families on philanthropic planning. More and more, they're including children as a part of philanthropic planning. They're hosting special seminars just for them to understand philanthropy. And I think one of the things that I've learned over the years from working with organizations like a Northern Trust and other banking institutions is the fact that it's not business as usual for this next generation. I can remember working on a campaign here in Chicago, and we approach a prominent philanthropist, the next generation, and basically the response was, that was my grandmother's and grandfather's charity. I've moved on. And so what we're finding with this next generation is you want to be in close communications with them, so they continue to see their parents' charities as relevant, impactful, and still really making a difference in the community. So I think it's this whole notion of involving the next generation. Almost every interview that we do with philanthropists, they always ask the question, what is the organization doing to engage the next generation?
Yeah. We see that all the time as well. And many of the foundations, the family foundations that we are so familiar with here in the Pacific Northwest, we know the families, and we've known them for years. More and more, we're hearing that they're turning the foundation, running of the foundation, over to their kids, and their kids are, in their 30s or 40s. So a lot of the baby boomers who have been running these foundations for a long time are saying, it's time for my kids to run the foundation. You need to talk to them. And they have their own ideas about where they want their money to go. So the point is to really think about the family and involving everyone in all the generations. We want to take a moment to really sort of take this back to what you can do, right? How can you position your organization to receive a transformational gift? All of this sounds great. We know that there are, hundreds of million-dollar gifts being made. So how do you position your organization? Well, it does come back to really three pretty basic ideas, but something to really keep in mind. And that's the internal systems in your team, how you're identifying and articulating your need, and then how do you match that up with your donor's sweet spot, as we want to call it. So first of all, when you look at, number one, you have to have the systems and the team in place. And this is not a bottom-up approach. It starts at the top. It starts with the CEO or the executive director. That is the person at the top of the organization who articulates the vision. And donors want to meet this person who will drive the impact of where your organization is going. So the CEO really is the key player. As important, of course, board leadership. We all know that there's nothing more effective than peer-to-peer engagement, not only in asking and stewardship, but in just bringing people in and introducing your organization. So think about that. Is your board really involved in this? Have they made a commitment to help you bring people closer to the organization and help you steward these organizations? Ask some of your board leaders, for instance, to hold a major thank you lunch for one of your top donors or for several of your top donors. Ask them to be involved because people want to have lunch with them. They also want to have lunch with the others in the organization, but that peer-to-peer relationship is really important. Of course, the Chief Development Officer is the glue. You set the table, you steward, you follow up. Often I'll say, the fundraising function as a development director or as a major gifts officer, you're the chief facilitator. You are the one who helps to facilitate that relationship between that donor and the leadership, the volunteer and the CEO. Dedicated frontline gift officers, it's really important that people are, they have the high impact on those potential major donors, and that the portfolios are targeted, maybe 25 to 50 key prospects. These are your highest prospects. And so those people need to stay really dedicated and focused on moving those people through your organization, inviting them in, finding out what their interest is, bringing them along, cultivating them. One of the things that we see, and I know many on the phone have, is that universities really understand a lot of this in terms of the president and the frontline gift officers. They really see that the president is key to the fundraising success, but not all sectors have really gotten there yet. And we really want to encourage you to do what you need to do to help build that. Of course, having internal systems is just so important. Having really strong prospect management systems with staff members responsible for the oversight of how you're managing that, having a great research system in place, assists in creating documents that brief people as they're getting prepared to have that meeting with your donors, and then really that consistent and that constituent relationship management system, a CRM system, that you've got a report creation system of relationships and tracking devices to really manage your program. The second area, of course, is how are you articulating your need? So these are just a few questions to think about. Do you have a vision statement? Do you have a strategic plan? I would assume so. How are you talking about it? Is it in such a way that anyone who is close to your organization can rattle it off, not verbatim perhaps, but really understand those key messages? Do your board members and your key volunteers and your staff have their own elevator speech, if you will? Can they speak from the heart about what is really important to this organization? What are your top funding initiatives? We like to ask people when we come in to work with various organizations, if you had $1 million walk in the door right now, would you be equipped to answer these questions? What would you do? What would be the first thing you would do if an unexpected $1 million gift came your way? You want to be ready for that. You know what you would do if you had more resources. So go through these questions and think about what your answer would be for your organization. And then, of course, what is the sweet spot? So once you're prepared, you've got the systems, you've got the staffing, you know how to answer these questions. What is the sweet spot for that particular prospect? Well, it has to be really a combination of all of these things. The research might identify the wealth. We know they have the capacity, but do they have the inclination? Does this mission align with some of the planning and some of their priorities that they have indicated their giving will be directed toward? Are they ready? Have you invited them in? Have you brought them along? Are they ready to be asked? Are they ready to be more engaged with your organization? And probably even most importantly, do they have passion? Are they passionate about your mission? Do all of these things come together and just sort of, with the big star in the middle here, the sweet spot where these all come together? And you need to understand your donor to really get to the point where they're ready to be asked for a transformational gift for them and for you when these things come together. I think it's important that we point out there's really an art and science of determining this. Perhaps 10% of that might be predictive modeling, screening, and research. They're very important pieces to determining if someone is a transformational gift prospect. But only through the personal relationships will you really be able to uncover that additional wealth. So you happen to notice that they've collected an art collection, or that they have 3 kids about to go to college. Those things are not necessarily going to show up in your research, but in that relationship that you build, you're going to know a lot more about where that donor is and whether they really are ready to step up and truly make a difference. So if they have the capacity, the inclination, the readiness, and the passion, then they're no longer supporting just a cause. They're really supporting an issue, and they're ready to make an investment. Brenda, back over to you on the basics here.
Yeah, so it goes back to what we all know. What are you doing to move your donor up this continuum? No matter how many shortcuts, it always comes back to this. As you think about these 7 key steps, and we call them, the 7 I's of turning constituents into donors, turning donors into making transformational gifts. It really does go along this continuum. And you think about, as you move people up, what are you doing to invite? What are you inviting these donors to? How are you communicating? How do you discern their interest? And the neat thing about these donors is they typically hang in packs. They have other friends. So once you get them to make a gift to you, that's typically not the end. Oftentimes, they're very willing to introduce their friends to you, to learn more about your organization, and hopefully provide an opportunity for their friends to be generous to the organization that they care about as well. Karen talked about having that these donors have a donor strategy and they have a donor plan. Well, you have to have a plan as well. You have to have a map. You need a map as an organization to bring a donor closer to your organization and really be thoughtful. So as you reflect back on the 7 I's and use that as a map on each step of this kind of continuum, what are you doing along each step to bring a donor closer to your mission, to challenge their giving and raising their sights where they see your organization as needing and worthy of a transformational gift. You also want to think about how do you thank them effectively? What are the things that would be meaningful to them? And then too, oftentimes when we talk with these philanthropists, the post-gift beyond expectations, you got to think about once you get the gift, now what? How do you continue to manage, maintain, cultivate, and continue to keep that donor engaged in your institution? Because as we said before, many times these gifts are outright cash gifts, but we really want to also be able to be in queue for the ultimate gift, which is a significant planned gift or a bequest to your organization. So in short, what you want to be thinking about, how do you create a great donor experience for your donor? As we look at our wrap up with you right now, we want to just make sure you have keep a few things in mind in terms of final thoughts. Number 1, stewardship. One size does not fit all. Make your stewardship meaningful, appropriate, effective, and customized to your donors. 58.9% of high net worth donors stopped giving because they were solicited too frequently or for the wrong amount. And oftentimes that wrong amount is due to inadequate timing. Time must be right, the timing must be right for the donor. And when the relationship has been developed to a level that makes solicitation a natural next step. Transformational gifts may be decades in the making, or they may come in more quickly than you can imagine. So be ready. Those questions that Karen outlined a few slides ago, you should always have a short list of, if our organization were to come into an opportunity for $1 million or $10 million, what would be the priorities? What would be the impact? What is the difference that we would be able to make in the community and with the populations that we serve? And lastly, determine meaningful and appropriate ways to thank and recognize your donors. And it doesn't have to be very expensive. It could be, as long as it's thoughtful. One of my clients shared with me a thank you note that he had received from Stanford University. He had made a gift to a library campaign. So on the front of the thank you card was a sketch of the library, and inside the text read, "Your gift to the Stanford University Libraries helps us assemble the sources, the arguments, the hypotheses, the wisdom, and controversies of the ages. For all those here and those yet to come, please accept our gratitude." The note was signed by the university librarian. So it doesn't have to be poetry, but it needs to catch your donor's attention and engage your thinking and involvement. So with that, we've discussed how transformational gifts are changing philanthropy and how to best engage with these donors. We hope you've picked up some ideas and tips that will help you as you begin your last 100 days of fundraising. But remember, this is for the long term. So these are baby steps if you're just starting to put in place a transformational gift effort. Of course, the Alfred Group is here to help. You could send me or Karen an email or give us a call with questions or to talk more about your organizational goals and needs. I'd like to spend a few minutes on any questions that that you have out there. We only have a few more minutes left, but if there's a question, let's go ahead and get it out there. So Karen, someone just texted in, a donor just pledged at the $25,000 gift level and is interested in a second gift. How do I maximize this next gift? Thoughts?
That's a great question. So they just pledged 25 and they want to make a second gift.
Right.
Well, part of it is to really, think about what is the impact that they have been able to make with that initial $25,000 gift, and how are you able to articulate how much more your organization can fulfill in terms of services or in terms of your mission with an additional gift. I think it's a great opportunity to ask a lot of questions of that donor and make sure that that second gift is something that's really tailored to where their greatest interest is. And congratulations, because if they're wanting to make a second gift after making a major gift like that, you're doing things right. So that's terrific.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is the 6th and final webinar in our summer webinar series. We really want to thank you for your participation and listening in. Be on the lookout for an email later today with the recording of today's presentation, the full slide deck, and a very short survey to tell us how we did. We, again, appreciate you for being on the line today, and this concludes today's webinar, and we will now disconnect.
Thank you.